Okay, so we are now recording, as you all hopefully have heard. Just momentarily flip to my slides, just briefly. Okay, so welcome everyone to our weekly call. As you will see from the slide this week, we're talking about the mandated use of DNS for content blocking. So that's where the DNS, obviously anyone can use it for content blocking, but this is where there's a requirement from a government or regulator or similar to do so. Before we get into that, though, I should say thank you to our long-term sponsors of the call, DNSOARC, whose support for the call is very much appreciated. So thank you to DNSOARC team. Right, so the plan for today. In a second, I will hand over first to Simon Forster, who many of you, I'm sure, know, General Manager of Quad9. I've realised I forgot to put on my Quad9 top to encourage you all to buy Quad9 merchandise to support the not-for-profit. So just imagine that I am always good to support Quad9. So Simon will talk about it from the perspective of an open resolver. A not-for-profit, as I mentioned, so no doubt talk about some of the challenges operationally that poses where they're required to implement content blocking. And then, rather pleasingly, Raffaele Sommese, who's been again on this call previously from the University of Twente, where he's, I think, Raffaele, associate professor, was on RIPE NCC's podcast a week or so ago, I think, talking about Italy's Piracy Shield, not Piracy Shield, Piracy Shield, where there is a mandated requirement to block content to essentially to sort of live streaming of the Liga content. And there have been some challenges around that, I think it's fair to say, but which Raffaele will talk to. Since I think both speakers will have a similar point of view on this topic, I may then, for a very short while, play devil's advocate somewhat, just for balance, but then we'll open up for discussion, and then depending on time, as always, if time permits, we'll talk about some of the other sort of recent DNS related stuff that's happened. I'll remind you of some forthcoming deadlines and topics for future calls, etc. So that's the plan, which hopefully is as you're all anticipating. So without further ado, let me stop sharing. Introduce first Simon. So welcome again, Simon. Good to have you on the call. I'll give you a chance to unmute and check that your connection is working.
Hopefully everything's okay, Andrew.
Yep, I can see you and hear you. So over to you. I'll give you a nudge time-wise if need be, but we'll be, as always, pretty informal on this. As long as we're sort of roughly on time, it'll be all good. So floor is yours.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So Andrew, thank you for the intro. Thank you for inviting me to this. As Andrew said, Simon Forster, General Manager of Quad9. So that means I generally manage to understand what the engineers are talking about. Something of a weak joke, but does sort of inform as to the direction of my talk, looking more at the sort of business side of things, running recursive resolver, not the bits and bytes and packets and protocols. This talk isn't really chatting here. It's not about not really seeking sympathy, but some hard luck stories do seem to come into it a little bit. But it's a perspective. It's doesn't offer simple solutions or prescriptions of anything. It's up to you to take from this what you will. Discussion points, if you like. As Andrew said, Quad9 is a public open recursive resolver. Anyone can use us. There's no registration, no account registration, no onboarding. Configure our IP address and on your device, and off you go. We're a very small organization, surprisingly small, I think. At our core, we're 9 people, supported by roughly half a dozen contractors. We're very small. Our annual income is 1.7 million Swiss francs, which is about 1.8 million euros. And because of the sterling performance of the dollar, I think that's about $2 million now. But it seems to change a little bit day by day. We also receive quite a lot of support, in-kind support. And by that, I mean connectivity, hardware, rack space, power, all that sort of thing. As a rough rule of thumb, we seem to be estimating that the value of this support is about 10 times of our cash revenue. We're working on firming that up, but that's a working guesstimate. Despite this very modest scale, Quad9 is the third largest global open recursive resolver on the internet, working alongside Google Cloud and Cloudflare, with Cisco's OpenDNS probably just a bit behind us. Our mission is to champion security, privacy, and integrity on the internet. That, we like to think, is also our point of difference. Many people around the world do not trust either their own domestic services or large American corporations to protect their privacy. As a result of this, what we're seeing is people moving away from those providers, and Quad9 is benefiting from that shift. I would say benefiting when you don't charge. Query volume growing at around 2% a month is difficult to keep up with. This growth does create a challenge. We operate about 230 resolver clusters in 110 countries. The cost and financial, both in terms of financial and human terms, of operating that infrastructure already exceeds our income. And we need to keep growing just to keep up with demand. So you can see that we've got a bit of a problem there. Oh, and of course, you may have noticed that there's been a sort of change in regime, so getting hold of grants is perhaps not as easy as it once was. As well as privacy, the other core service we provide is security. We disrupt thousands of malicious communications every second. We do this using threat intelligence provided by 35 independent organizations. So we don't actually produce the threat intelligence ourselves. People donate it to us free of charge. Because of the service we're offering, because of our reach, we reckon about 200 million people use Quad9 worldwide. Security-focused, privacy-preserving resolver service that supports part of the internet's critical infrastructure. We do this under stringent Swiss privacy laws as a not-for-profit, and we do it on a global basis with an explicit intention to reach underserved markets. So Quad9 is the third largest global open resolver, but why do large US corporations operate free recursive resolvers that generate no revenue? What's in it for them? Main players, Google, Cloudflare, Cisco, via OpenDNS. Let's have a quick look at those briefly. Cisco's model seems to be the most straightforward. DNS is the earliest and an easily scalable security choke point. By operating a recursive resolver, Cisco can block malicious domains before any connection is made, preventing command and control traffic, phishing, ransomware, and data exfiltration. DNS is a preventative security control as far as Cisco is concerned, and they decided they needed to own that to complement their existing offerings. So, as we all know, they acquired OpenDNS. OpenDNS, the original public resolver, still exists. It also provides threat intelligence value to Cisco. I would argue that, more importantly, for Cisco, OpenDNS familiarizes users with DNS-based security and creates a clear upgrade path to Umbrella, which is their paid-for product, which in turn neatly leads into Cisco's broader networking and security portfolio. It seems like a fairly simple, well-aligned business case. Google, slightly different. It's something I've described as a sort of preemptive defensive move. Clearly, DNS resolution affects page load time and overall user experience. By operating its own large recursive resolver, Google ensures that its services always resolve with negligible latency, regardless of issues in third-party networks. That benefits search, YouTube, Gmail, Docs, Drives, Ads, APIs, to the whole Google environment. The resolver improves performance, resilience, and control, but it also gives Google kudos, I suppose, as a steward of critical internet infrastructure. Obviously, there's a clear public benefit there to everyone who wants to use it, but it's a byproduct. It's not the primary driver. The primary driver is ensuring that Google's services remain fast and reliable. Cloudflare, it's a similar sort of story, slightly different, but combination of the two. Running a public recursive resolver supports its narrative of providing infrastructure and control at the edge. DNS feeds directly into Cloudflare's CDN, caching and DDoS mitigation services. As with Google, the resolver ensures that the path to paid services is fast and predictable. The telemetry produced is also quite useful, of course. They do wrap this up in a stated commitment to user privacy. The reason for going through that is that in each case, the free recursive resolver is actually vertically integrated into a broader commercial strategy. Quad9 is different. Recursive resolution is our mission. We have no other mission. We exist to serve users, not shareholders, and that leads us to view the world a little bit differently. Privacy and security paramount, so is networking neutrality. As long as your actions don't result in unintended harm to you, the user, fraud, malware, or similar, we'll resolve what you ask for without failure and without logging your activity. So we see ourselves as a counterweight to large commercial providers whose resolver services are ultimately aligned with their own business objectives. Our service is aligned to user needs. Clearly, this is a perspective others have sympathy with. Andrew was involved in it. The setting up of the European-wide, European-operated recursive resolver, DNS for EU. Sorry, DNS for EU. All fairly mundane, different organizations, different incentives, but all fairly straightforward. We're finding things are getting a bit more interesting, though, when we look at sort of policy and what's happening now with respect to legislation, which is spinning out. Just as Cisco recognized that resolvers are a security checkpoint, policymakers have recognized that controlling resolvers means controlling access to information. Much of that shift is being driven by intellectual property rights holders, particularly organizations with exclusive streaming rights for sports content. We're all aware of the request for takedowns and blocking of domains. Well, rights holders have decided that that whole process is a little too cumbersome, and they're bypassing that layer and targeting the resolver directly. We, on average, receive slightly more than one summons per month from the French courts alone. Each requires our attendance in France within weeks of receiving that demand. Pressure is ramping up. The most recent summon we've just got not only demands we block specified domains, but seeks fines of €2,000 per domain per day if we fail to comply. Quite frankly, we don't have the resources to attend those hearings. We certainly don't have the resources to deal with the fines. That's France. We zoom out. Italian and Spanish courts are among the more aggressive actors. We're not currently in their sights, but Cloudflare are. I'm sure everyone's aware that in January, they were hit with the 14 million euro fine, 16 million euro dollars, for failing to comply with Piracy Shield regulations. I think Raffaele's going to talk more about that fairly shortly. And I have to say, I went through your paper, fascinated with it, agree with everything you say. So Andrew, you're going to have to beat us up a little bit to put the other point forward. And behind all that, if we look across the pond at the United States, things aren't looking so rosy over there either. I'm going to say that this legal pressure, it's sort of acting as a form of natural selection. Only the largest resolvers, and that means, and those supported by vertically integrated business models, are likely to survive. That means large American corporations. So there's a tension here because the European Union wants to move away from relying on large American corporations to provide infrastructure, and yet we're pushing in that direction. I don't know how you resolve that tension. This reduction in choice is not hypothetical. DNS0.eu, which was a French not-for-profit resolver, was directly involved in the court summons October last year. They shut down within a few days of that summons coming out. So clearly it's having an effect. This is reducing the resolvers that are out there. Obviously, we've got a choice. As a recursive resolver, we can comply with every request that's made to us. We block whatever we're told to block by whoever tells us to block it. For us as a global resolver, we're concerned because that means that decisions made by one nation state are applied worldwide. And the problems with this approach are well documented. ICANN, Internet Infrastructure Coalition, ISOC, Analysis Mason, they've all published work outlining the risks of broad-based DNS level blocking. We all know that applying blocks only to a specific country is theoretically possible. We probably also know that geo-IP is an imperfect art, and so, yes, it's not going to be perfect. It's also doing it at scale, the sort of scale we're talking about here, and at the speed we're talking about, is a non-trivial engineering problem. Within Quad9, we did some back-of-envelope costings. Assuming a 10 to 15% CPU overhead, we estimated an upfront hardware cost of around $1.7 million. Not a lot for many organizations, I'm sure, but that's our annual budget gone. That's the one-off hardware cost as well. It excludes the annual ongoing costs of power, space, connectivity, and the administration of those services. The upfront cost, we looked at that and we just stopped working out the numbers. We don't know what it's going to cost us overall, but clearly it's not affordable to us. There's another concern here that we're picking up on, and again, it's mentioned in Raffaele's paper. Security implications. Courts who are pushing these summons towards us expect us to introduce mechanisms, effectively backdoors, to implement blocking. In the Italian case, it's meant to be within 30 minutes. At least I understand that to be the case. Creates technical and what I call supply chain risks. Technical risks, backdoor can be exploited. Supply chain risk, well, I don't know what the process is used by the IP rights holders is to determine what domains should go into a block list. Nor do I know who's involved in it, nor do I know how many people are involved in it. Nor do I know what validation process exists. But all it would take is for a bad actor to do a bit of social engineering, persuade someone to put some other domains into the block list, and away you go. Domain no longer resolves, so it's disrupted. What's more worrying, or as worrying, I don't know, the whole process is concerning. There's no clear remediation process for any errors. There's no timing out of any domains. Once in there, it's forgotten about. This is not how you run the system, guys. So, so what? The resolver's out there. This is Quad9's problems. It's not your problems. Who cares? Yeah, I suppose it's a viewpoint. Resolvers are a natural choke point. Control the resolver, control access to downstream services. Quad9's concerns are the user's access to the internet is mediated by companies headquartered in a country where reliability, predictability, and geopolitical stability may not be what we once assumed. Where the company's interests are not really aligned with the user's interests. Or where what users get to see is controlled by unaccountable third-party companies. I think Matthew Prince referred them as a shady European cabal. Where the basic infrastructure of the internet is purposefully broken by people who do not fully grasp the consequences of the actions. That can't be good. I'm unclear as to where this all ends up. Quad9's going to keep on pushing, though, within its limited budget. And, any support, and I'm not meaning financial support necessarily, but any moral support you can offer to Quad9 is really gratefully received here. And Andrew, over to you then. I assume the waving of the hand was Simon, shut up.
Maybe come to an initial conclusion, perhaps, rather than shut up. But yeah, you did that very elegantly, nevertheless. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
I won't be devil's advocate yet, because I want to bring in Raffaele, and that seemed to sort of segue neatly into probably where Raffaele would want to take the discussion anyway, since you did touch on sort of Cloudflare and Piracy Shield to an extent. So without further ado, Raffaele, you made it gave an interesting presentation at a few other places and podcasts. So over to you.
Yeah, I'm not going to project slide again because I've given talk in several occasions, but I think it's good to keep this more of an open discussion. So I want to start from something Simon said. Recursive resolver are natural checkpoints, but we do checkpoint for a reason, and it is trying to prevent that the user get harmed. If you think about in the analogy of the real world, you are trying to prevent, with the block list that you implement in recursive resolver, you're trying to prevent a mass shooting. In blocking for piracy and blocking for illegal streaming, you are protecting the interest of a private company that are legitimate interests. I'm not saying that there are not legitimate interests. The fight against piracy is legitimate, but you're trying to protect the interest of a private company with a public tool. And this is fine up to the point that that private company does its own effort in trying to curb down the piracy. But for most of the requests that have been coming in terms of blocking requests for Piracy Shield, but also for other provider, this is not really the case. This is an easy tool that basically give all the burden to the operator. Now, let me tell you how the tool was born. So basically in July 2023, in Italy, we had this law that was voted, and the law was unanimously approved by Chamber and Senate. That was a very weird thing for Italy. We never get law that all the political exponents agreed on. But law, in this case, it was the case. And basically, the law was saying that all the copyright holder were mandated to, were offered this platform for requesting block of IPv4, actually also IPv6, but they never used IPv6, and fully qualified domain names in entire Italy. Within 30 minutes, they send in the request if they suspect of illegal streaming without going through a judge. They just need to provide the forensic evidence that the IP address of the FQDN was used for the sole activities of illegal streaming. Now, all of you knows that that's impossible. It's possible to demonstrate the contrary, but it's impossible to demonstrate that is the sole activity because you don't know how many resources are hosted on a single domain or how many resources are hosted on a single IP. Agicom, that is the regulator for Italy, was mandated to basically implement this platform and oversee basically the imposition of this block. And funny enough, there was no way to unblock a resource. So the law itself said that there was no way. If a block was in there forever. And of course, things didn't went well. We had bumps down the road, and at a certain point, Cloudflare IPs of Cloudflare got in the block list, piece of CDN of Cloudflare. So a lot of websites went offline for collateral damage, of course, because they were hosted on the IP of the CDN. The fully qualified domain name of Google Drive got into the block list. Luckily enough, got into the block list on Saturday evening. And I'm saying luckily enough, because even if the domain was removed from the block list 1 hour later, even if the law was saying that it was impossible to remove a domain from the block list, even if the domain was removed from the block list because they realized the mistake 1 hour later, Google Drive kept to be unreachable from several operators in Italy for almost a day, so for the entire Sunday, because DNS has that weird behavior of doing things that's called caching. So a lot of people kept using the kept being served the web page of the block because of their cache. And in general, so we ran this research and we showed that many websites suffer of collateral damage. We counted more than 500 legitimate websites since the beginning of the activity of Piracy Shield, and 500 legitimate websites still nowadays. And this is all manual investigation. We had to go through each IP address one by one. We had to go through each domain one by one to check basically if there was a collateral damage, to demonstrate that this collateral damage existed. So this is a very low number, low threshold of the real number, probably of the real collateral damage that the platform is currently causing. What they did, in October 2024, they updated the law. And they said, okay, now the activity should not be the reason for blocking a domain name or for blocking an IP address could not be that that IP address or the domain is solely responsible for sending out illegal content, but it's predominantly now in the law. They didn't say what predominantly means. There is no definition of predominantly. And the funny thing is that in the law of October 2024, they say also that VPN and DNS provider, or whatever they are located, whatever legislation they run into, whatever place in the world they are, they need to obey to the blocking of Piracy Shield, and they need to apply the blocking of Piracy Shield. So if you run a Pi-hole instance or a local unbound instance in your home, technically you are obliged to apply the block of Piracy Shield. And the other thing is that if an internet service provider in Italy has suspicious or an indication of an illegal activity, so a user watching an illegal football stream, they need to contact police, otherwise they are legally responsible, they can risk 1 year in jail. This is in the law of October 2024. And yet, after all the collateral damage, after all the fact that this law is almost draconian, they claim that the platform is a success. And they claim that the platform is a success not by the metrics of the fact that the number of subscription, for example, to legal services has been increased, or the revenue, for example, of the content provider has increased, but by the fact that the platform was able to block 10,000 IPv4 address and 40,000 fully qualified domain name. Now, not sure of you, but I don't know if there is really a metric for a law to say that the law is effective based on the number of people that the law managed to put in jail. Because that's exactly the same metric. So the problem here is that, sure, there is 10,000 IPs that have been blocked and 40,000 QDN that have been blocked, but these people that manage these streaming networks, for them, a domain name costs like $1. And an IPv4 address, if they want to renew or release a new address with the IP leasing, or if they just get like a new machine with a new IP address, it will cost like, what, $5, $6. So the cost to the streamer, to the legal streamer, is negligible. The cost to the operators, it's tremendous, as Simon was saying. And the fact that the block lasts forever, it means also that IP address get reused at certain point, domain name get reused, and the new owner of the IP address and the new owner of the domain name will basically make impossible for them to use this address or this domain name in Italy. And that's what we call collateral damage in the paper that we wrote. And the funny thing is that the list of the blocks is not public. So at the moment, you cannot really know if your own domain or if your own IP address is in the list of the blocks. I mean, there is a web page you can check one by one, but you imagine you have a company, you run thousands of domains, and you have thousands of IP addresses. You're not going through a page checking one by one all the address. And to the point that among the research that we did in the paper, there was a Portuguese hosting provider that we reached out because we noticed that they start to use one of the IP address that was blocked for their the operation of their name server. And after 1 week, they switched to a different IP address. And I say, oh, maybe they noticed that they were blocked by Piracy Shield. Let me reach them. Maybe they noticed that they were blocked by Piracy Shield, so they decided to use another address. And we reached them and said, no, we just noticed that all the traffic from Italy dropped at a certain point. So Italian people were not able to reach our customer or the website of our customer, and we didn't know why. So we just requested a new IP because we didn't know what to do. So it was like, yeah, maybe some sort of filtering, but they didn't suspect even that was Piracy Shield. So the problem here is that really there is a lot of burden to operators, in particular internet service provider in Italy, and when it comes to IP address, because for IP address blocking is a /32 entry in the routing table for the blackhauling, and for FQDN is of course an entry in RPZ or whatever mechanism you use to block domain name. Then for Italian operator, maybe FQDN blocking is sort of easier because they just block for all the operation. They don't care of international user. For international user, as Simon said, of course, that's impossible to do at scale if you want to do only for Italy. And GeoIP is not a legal grade technology. If your provider of IP to location fails to detect where a user is from, who is legally responsible for the fact that you have provided a response to a user that is within Italy, for example, to a domain that should have been blocked to Italy. So the picture here is basically that streamers have a very easy way to evade all this blocking. They simply don't care. They are just investing a bit more of money in buying a new domain name and buying a new IP address. But that's a very easy job because, of course, they have back channel communication through Telegram, through many other platforms in which they communicate, which are the new address where a user needs to connect to. The platform is putting an enormous burden to operators. It is a single point of control of the entire internet of a country because, again, Simon really already mentioned this, but if a malicious actor manages to take control of this platform, or even better, if a malicious actor makes to believe the copyright holders that certain illegal content is streamed from a certain source, and I mean, all of us know that BGP hijacking exists. It's not an impossible attack to perform. So if that happens and a critical service goes in the blocking, this may cause far-reaching consequences to the point that the life of someone may be at risk. Imagine blocking a critical service like an hospital or a service that goes between a pharmacy and an hospital. I know that many of these services are within internal network or within VPN, but there is part of this service that goes on the public internet, of course, because you may need to access this service from everywhere. So they may be cases where the public internet may be needed for vital service of people. And at the end of the day, this is not bringing anywhere to any result. So the conclusion that we got from the study is this is really something that was perceived and conceived from someone that has no understanding of how the internet works and no understanding of the working principles that are in today's internet. So I think more or less I covered the main part. I don't want to go into we have a full paper of where we dissect basically all the numbers of collateral damage. But my main point, I think, for the call was really the fact that the platform is not effective. The law is making just damage. It's not bringing any advantage to anyone.
Perfect. Well, that's stunning timing to the second, Raffaele. I'm quite impressed. And we can send me the link to the additional paper. I'll make sure we share that post-call so that people can sort of read that properly as well. Okay, let me make a few comments in the spirit of balance. Devil's advocate, for those of you familiar with your Spanish history. Some of these things I think are good points. Some of them just to be said. So don't shoot me. Anyway, things I've jotted down. And I should say I'm not a fan of what's been implemented specifically in Italy, because I think to begin with, any blocking process for whatever reason really ought to be a judicial process with a court order, which can be appealed by the affected parties either at the point when it's enacted or later. So there should absolutely be a transparent sort of, judicial process with an appeal ability for it, which clearly isn't the case with Piracy Shield, if I've understood it. For what it's worth, Simon will blanch at this point, I think we should look at geolocation with recursive resolvers and accept, whilst it's imperfect for the reasons that both of you said, reasonable regulators usually accept that something which is 90% plus effective is sufficient. Any reasonable regulator doesn't look for perfection in a regulation, because that's largely never going to happen, no matter how good and tight the regulation is. So the use of geolocation to see, is this probably coming from Italy, therefore we shouldn't serve X, it should be okay. On the collateral damage of IP sharing, I'm conscious that certain CDN operators could manage that better by not sharing certain putting the same services on shared addresses. So they may use that as a defense to not do things. So that a lot of that could be managed in the background by CDNs, by having IPs that they use for bad services, if you will, and moving them proactively onto that would be my view. I also think it'd be very valid for any good regulation, in addition to whatever it does, should be looking upstream to the likes of ICANN's DNS abuse policies to enact better regulation there longer term. So anything that's national, longer term, could be improved by working within the wider ecosystem, whether that's ICANN or First or others. Two other points, and then I'll stop. I fully understand why the block list is not public. Having been involved with this for other purposes, many of you will know that I'm a trustee of the Internet Watch Foundation. Our block list isn't public. That's because abusers, in our case paedophiles, would cheerfully use that as a handy guide to find out where all the stuff is that they're interested in. So I can see why it's not public. So that sort of case-by-case test, I think, Raffaele, that you sort of talked about, I can understand why it's like that rather than a published list. But equally, I can understand why people get nervous if it's not transparent in some way. And final point, which might please Simon more so, the system in the UK certainly was, I think it still is, but I'm not 100% sure, that where copyright holders got a court order, they had to pay the reasonable costs of a resolver operator to implement the block. So I think adding that to any regulation would be, I think, definitely preferred. So the rights holders do bear the cost of implementing what they want, so that a service like Simon's can recover the cost of blocking, as it's implemented, rather than them having to bear all of the costs all of the time, which seems grossly unfair. That might not matter to, I don't know, say Google or Cloudflare, but clearly will do, certainly in the case of a not-for-profit. And I believe that's the case in the UK, certainly. I'll probably pause there, because I mean, there's just some thoughts to sort of partly support why it's maybe a good thing, and rule of law and all that. I'm sure plenty of other people on the call have points of view. Rather than me reading from some of the stuff in the chat, which I'll put up with a link to the recording, why don't we ask anyone that wants to make a comment, feel free to raise your virtual hand
give me a
using
break.
the tool. And or you can put something in the chat. I'll read it out, but it's better to have more of a conversation, which Tom has done so by raising his virtual hand. So Tom, you come in first, then Peter, and then we see who else does. And obviously, I'll wrap up probably in about 5 minutes, and then give Simon and Raffaele the last word, because that seems only fair. So Tom first.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of say first that I've got absolutely no sympathy for the football rights holders, who are fantastically wealthy already, and should probably solve their problem in the same way the music industry started to solve their problem, by making online access to their product cheap and easy. But as Andrew does allude, there are situations in which we think we would like to do this sort of thing, in that, there is content which we can all agree is illegal, such as child sexual abuse material. That's also consequently quite hard to get taken down because of where it is. There's got to be some way of dealing with this, but this doesn't seem the ideal way. But as you know, as we make ISPs blind to what's transiting through them, I think it's a problem that the technical community has to come together to help solve, isn't it?
Okay, I think that's probably a rhetorical question, so I won't ask Simon or Raffaele to comment on that, but maybe bring Peter in.
Yeah, just one little point to respond to your point about...
Eat this. Eat it.
Oh.
Eat it.
Sorry.
I don't think that was aimed at you, Pete.
No. Just to respond to the point about the ICANN, it is good that they've got something in place to resolve disputes, but it's not a legally binding resolution, and it only scopes the registries and registrars mostly. So for operators, it's not unfortunately not that helpful in a lot of cases. And it doesn't apply to subdomains and dynamic DNS operators, and a lot of the scope is kind of limited, unfortunately. So it's a good effort, though, and the whole thing about this is I think that it's much better to have something in place which is imperfect than nothing at all. But yeah, there are absolutely so many issues that I'm glad I don't have to solve. Yeah. Anyway, thanks. That was it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to come in?
I have a comment on the child abuse content, basically, so the CSAM content. There, I mean, the reason why I made clearly the distinction at the beginning, there is something that harm the user, and there is something that harm an economic, a financial entity. That's where you can clearly somehow draw the line. And when you say they cannot share the list because you can use that pointer then to watch an illegal streaming, sure, that maybe for FQDN works, maybe, and you can still delay the publication of list like of X weeks. But for IP address, for example, that doesn't work because you cannot do much with an IP address, basically. So at the end of the day, they don't publish the list because they don't want to be audited.
Yeah, and probably irrespective of whether it's published, it certainly should be audited by someone, even if it's done in the background somehow. But yeah, there should be checks and balances, whatever the system. And I'm trying to not get too specific to Piracy Shield, which I suspect there'd be a lot of agreement that needs to be improved. I would imagine, without speaking for everyone else on the call. Okay, I'm just seeing if anyone else is brave enough to raise their hand. There's some good points in the chat, but it will take us too long to go through all of those. So, Mikey.
Yeah. So I just wanted to point out that we've seen that censorship through public DNS resolvers is really not a good solution in the grand scheme of things. It puts too much burden on the operators. And I don't know the answer, and I don't think any of us do, but there's a different way to give most people what they want. Can't please everyone, but giving most people what they want is probably attainable, but that's not really the way. And also to Simon, hey, you got your hand raised. You always have a friend at DNS Filter, so reach out if you need anything.
Perfect.
Thanks very much.
Well, there's a cue, Simon. Thank you, Mikey.
So I just wanted to really say, Andrew, you made a point about geo IP blocking and a reasonable regulator and what have you. I'd like to point out that in certainly one of the cases we had, one of the German courts, through that, we weren't blocking adequately because the GeoIP wasn't blocking certain parts of Germany. So, yeah, I hear what you say about reasonable regulator. I'd like to say not all regulators are reasonable, though. And back to Tom's point, I think the reason we're here talking about this, surely, is that we recognise something's got to be done. I don't know what that something is. All I'm telling you is that what we've got at the moment doesn't seem to be working particularly well. From our perspective, it doesn't work well at all. And Raphael's clearly pointed out some issues as well. So it'd be good if, as an industry, we could come together and perhaps talk to policymakers and say, hey guys, change your direction of travel a little bit.
Something on that point, Vicky put in the chat earlier, not specifically for this purpose, but I think it's worth floating as an idea, is maybe developing a BCP for DNS blocking would be a good thing. We could maybe go slightly broader than that, maybe and look at best practice beyond just the blocking and talk about some of the regulation and why something like geolocation is the best available tool, given that you can't ever get to 100%. So maybe there's something we should write down as sort of best practice for regulators, something I call it, that's a bad name, but you know what I mean, to offer guidance for those parties that would be receptive to be receiving such guidance. Just as a thought, maybe that will be an action we could usefully take out of this. Right, I'm conscious of the time, and I did want to pick up a couple of things at the end. So as I say, I won't go through all this stuff in the chat. There's some good comments, and I will share all of that afterwards, so you all have a chance to peruse that, and we can always come back to the topic. But I did promise Raffaele and Simon, any final sort of 30-second thoughts that you'd want to share just by way of closing? Or do you think you've said everything you want to say? That's fine as well. Raffaele first, perhaps, in reverse order.
I think even my final thought is on the BCP part. I think even if we come out with the BCP, we need to outline the cost that DNS blocking has for operators, and the fact that at the end of the day, as we see for the normal problem of DNS abuse that we fight every day, the benefit is very little somehow.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Simon, closing comment from you, if you have one.
I'll just, I suppose, reiterate that not massively praise piracy or anything along those lines, but it's just what's being forced on us at the moment isn't working, and there needs to be something better. But I don't pretend to know what better is. Actually, I like the English system that you keep on talking about, Andrew. So that seems to work reasonably well, but there is a bit of a cost burden there. But we need to persuade policymakers to change their tune.
Okay. All right. Well, look, let's pick up this discussion further and work out where. And I saw Eric put in the chat that Morg's coming up very shortly, and that might be the next forum where this topic could be tackled. Right, very briefly, because I will want to finish on the hour. I know many of you will have other things to do. Let me just reshare my slides for about 2 minutes. I promise I will be brief. I won't go through all of this. I'll share this afterwards, but there's lots of interesting stuff that's happened DNS related over the last week, but it would take too long to go through it. A couple of other things that caught my eye. I just wanted to highlight there being a few things in the press policy-wise around more parties coming around to the idea of bans, social media bans or smartphone bans. So that seems to be building some impetus. Equally, Etsy has put a new standard out that's AI related. And Cloudflare, oddly, seemed to be calling for some regulation of Google, was sort of my take of their recent blog post. So I commend that to you. And there's also a court case in California at the moment linked to addiction of social media. Final one I called out at the bottom of the slide, crypto wallets received a record 158 billion in illicit funds last year. I know we talked about blockchain related naming systems, which we'll come back to that topic in a few weeks' time. Anything which links to a wallet I have concerns about, because that does seem to be an enormous attack surface for various reasons. Whole bunch of other stuff, but we don't have time. Some looming deadlines I wanted to highlight. A couple of weeks' time, you've got the OAuth 46 early bird registration expires. Also, there's a couple of weeks' time, there are 7, I think, ICANN leadership positions. They're looking for nominations for 2 board members and various others. And also you've got the Right 92 early bird registration coming up as well. Again, I'll skip through these. Nanog this week as well as Apricot, but if you're there, you'll know that. So that's maybe superfluous. And then finally, next week, we'll talk about the EU Multi-Stakeholder Forum on Internet Standards. I know the timing's not ideal, but I think Ross, Philippe and Vittorio, I believe, will be able to join us. The timing might be such that at least Philippe might be joining slightly late, but hopefully you all can. And any others involved with that exercise that want to join as well, please do, just to share your impressions of the first session, which has sort of taken place fairly recently. I'll stop there. I've already thanked our sponsors, so I hope that was useful and has given you all some food for thought. So thank you, particularly Simon and Raphael, for sort of just sharing your thoughts, which was pretty stimulating. As I said, I think probably Piracy Guard is a case study on how to do better, or having, don't do that. I think there are better ways you could do something, but that's not it. But let's come back to that topic and see if we can develop what best practice might look like, albeit with an imperfect tool. So on that note, I hope that was useful. Have a fantastic week, everyone, as always, and hopefully see you next week to talk about that European Commission Multi-Stakeholder Forum. So see you all then. Bye, everyone.